The evening sky bled rust over the prairie, a copper sun sinking behind broken hills. Dust swirled like smoke through the crooked fence posts as she stood in the doorway of the sagging homestead. Boots scuffed the warped floorboards, his boots, heavy, deliberate, carrying the sour scent of whiskey before he even spoke. "You think you're better than me?" The words rasped like sandpaper. His shadow stretched long across the room, swallowing hers whole. She said nothing. Silence was safer. He stepped closer, breath hot, a gambler's grin cutting across his unshaven face. "Your mama's land, my land now. Sold it for a steak at the tables. Bought me a bottle, too." He lifted the half-empty flask and let it dangle like a threat. Her fingers curled into her skirt. "That land was hers," she whispered. The back of his hand struck like a pistol crack. She hit the floor hard, cheeks stinging, lantern light spinning above. Boards groaned beneath his spurs as he loomed over her. "Worthless," he spat. "A burden since the day you were born." He ground his boot heel into the old rug, each twist a cruel punctuation. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the shutters, carrying the faint scent of rain that never came. She tasted copper and grit, yet her eyes, wide, unbroken, locked on the door beyond him. He noticed and sneered. "Don't look to that horizon. Ain't nobody riding for you." She pushed herself upright, slow as dawn. Her voice steadied, low but clear. "Someday, someone will." He laughed, a dry, broken sound, and kicked the lantern. Flame flared. Shadows lunged across the walls. "You'll learn. Tonight or the next, you'll learn." But the firelight caught something in her gaze, a flicker of resolve he couldn't stamp out. She pressed her palm to the floor, feeling the earth's quiet strength beneath the rotting boards. Outside, a lone coyote called, the sound slicing through the heavy air like a promise. He turned away, muttering curses as he snatched his coat. The door slammed behind him, the night swallowing his footsteps. She remained on the floor, blood warm on her cheek, eyes fixed on the thin silver edge of moonlight seeping through the cracks. The wind whispered against the walls, carrying a vow only she could hear. This betrayal would not be her end. The desert stretched endless and pale under a merciless noon. Heat shimmered off the hardpan like a living thing, bending the horizon into a wavering lie. Her wrists burned where the rope bit deep, the coarse hemp slick with sweat and blood. His horse shifted, restless in the stillness. He tightened the knot with a savage yank and grinned down at her. "No one's comin', girl. World's big and empty. You'll dry out before the buzzards find you." She clenched her jaw, swallowing the taste of fear. "You don't own me," she said, voice cracked but steady. He spat into the dust. "I own what I take." The spurs on his boots rattled as he swung into the saddle. "Reckon the sun'll finish what I started." The horse snorted, hooves kicking grit as he turned toward the horizon. For a heartbeat she thought he might look back. He didn't. The outlaw's silhouette shrank against the blinding sky until it was only heat haze and silence. She tugged against the rope, each movement slicing her skin. Sand scorched her knees. The wind hissed across the flats, carrying the dry rattle of sage. Her heartbeat slowed, heavy and uneven. A vulture wheeled overhead, lazy, patient. Her vision wavered. The world tilted. She tasted metal and dust, lips splitting under the sun's relentless gaze. A memory flickered. Her mother's voice, soft as cotton, telling her to hold on. Always hold on. She forced her breath shallow, conserving what little strength remained. The rope scraped raw as she twisted her wrists inch by inch. The afternoon bled into a molten orange. Shadows stretched long and thin across the barren ground. She sagged forward, forehead brushing the sand. Coolness teased beneath the surface, hope buried in heat. Then, a sound. Faint, rhythmic, hoofbeats. Her eyes snapped open. Not the outlaw returning. The cadence was different, slower, steadier. She lifted her head. squinting through the rippling air. A lone rider approached from the west, a dark figure against the dying sun. The breeze shifted, carrying the scent of horses and distant rain. Her heart stumbled, then beat hard. The world blurred again, but she held to that sound, the sure, deliberate drumming of hooves, as darkness crept in from the edges. Someone was out there. Someone was coming. Lantern light flickered against rough-hewn beams as the door creaked open. The rancher stepped inside, carrying her as though she weighed no more than a sack of grain, yet his movements were careful, reverent. Dust from the desert clung to her hair and the torn hem of her dress, leaving faint trails on the floorboards. He laid her gently on a narrow cot near the hearth. The cabin smelled of wood smoke and black coffee, the air warm against the chill that still clung to her skin. "Easy now," he murmured, voice low and graveled from years of prairie wind. "You're safe." Her eyelids fluttered. For a moment she saw only shadows, the dance of firelight on log walls. Then his weathered face came into focus, deep lines around steady eyes, a gray-streaked beard, a broad hat resting on a nearby peg. "Water," she rasped. He poured from a tin kettle, tipping the cup to her lips. The first swallow burned cold down her parched throat. She coughed, then drank again, slower this time. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Clara." He nodded. "I'm Cade. Ranch is mine for what it's worth." Outside, the wind keened across the empty range, a lonely hymn. Inside, the crackle of the fire filled the silence between them. Clara pushed herself upright, wincing as rope burns flared across her wrists. Cade caught the motion, fetched a small jar, and dabbed salve on the raw skin with surprising gentleness. "Who did this?" he asked, eyes narrowing. Her gaze fell to the floor. "My stepfather." The words were almost a whisper, but the weight of them landed hard. Cade's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping near his temple. "A man who hurts his own blood," he said quietly, "ain't no man at all." Clara met his eyes then, searching for any flicker of pity. Instead she found something steadier, resolve, like iron beneath the weathered calm. "You can stay here till you're strong," Cade said. "No one's getting past me." The fire popped, sending a warm glow across her face. For the first time in days, maybe years, Clara felt a hint of safety settle in her chest, fragile as dawn, but real as the earth beneath the cabin floor. Outside, the prairie night stretched wide and silent, stars pricking the velvet dark like tiny promises of a life not yet lost. The sun sagged low, spilling red light across the wide pasture as evening settled over Cade's ranch. Crickets sang in the grass, but Clara felt the weight of something darker pressing in from the horizon. The air smelled of sage and distant rain, a stillness before a storm. She sat on the porch steps, a shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders, watching the last band of sunlight fade. Cade emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. "You all right?" he asked. Before she could answer, the sharp clop of hooves cut through the hush. A lone rider crested the ridge. Even at a distance she knew the silhouette. Wide hat pulled low, posture drunk with arrogance. Her stepfather. Her breath caught. Cade followed her gaze, eyes narrowing. He rested a hand on the rifle leaning against the post. The outlaw reined in at the edge of the yard, dust swirling around his horse's legs. "Evening, sweetheart," he called, voice slick with mockery. "Ran off without saying goodbye." Clara stood, forcing her knees to lock. "You have no right to be here." He tipped his hat, grin thin and mean. "I got every right. You're mine." Cade stepped forward, calm but unyielding. "Not tonight. Not ever again." Cade stepped forward, calm but unyielding. "Not tonight. Not ever again." The outlaw's eyes flicked to the rifle, then back to Cade's steady stance. "You think you can keep her?" He chuckled, though it rang hollow in the cooling air. "Ain't a man alive can stop me." Cade's voice stayed low, each word heavy as a hammer. "Try me." The two men held the silence like a drawn gun. The only sound was the restless stamping of the outlaw's horse. Shadows stretched longer, the porch lantern throwing thin gold across Cade's face. Finally, the outlaw spat into the dust. "This ain't over," he growled. "I'll be back." He jerked the reins, turning the horse toward the darkening hills. Hoofbeats faded into the growing night. Clara's shoulders sagged, but her heartbeat still pounded in her ears. Cade lowered the rifle and glanced at her, voice quiet. "He's testing the ground. Next time he won't come alone." The wind stirred, carrying a chill through the lantern glow. Clara wrapped the shawl tighter, a silent vow forming behind her steady eyes. She would not run, not anymore. Morning broke sharp and cold, a pale wash of light spilling across Cade's ranch. Clara rode beside him, the mare's breath fogging in the crisp dawn. Neither spoke on the slow trail into town, but the rhythm of hooves over packed earth carried a silent purpose. The sheriff had to know. Main Street lay quiet when they arrived. Only the rattle of a loose sign above the saloon and the faint creak of shutters in the breeze. Cade dismounted first, offering his hand to Clara. She slid down stiffly, rope burns hidden beneath her sleeves. The sheriff's office smelled of tobacco and oiled leather. Maps and wanted posters lined the walls, corners curled from years of sun. Sheriff Daltrey looked up from his desk, a man carved from oak, eyes the color of storm clouds. Cade spoke first. "She's been hurt, needs the law on her side." Daltrey studied Clara, gaze steady but not unkind. "Tell me." Her throat tightened. The room seemed to shrink around her. Cade's hand settled lightly on her back, a quiet anchor. She drew a breath. "My stepfather. He tied me out in the desert. He'll come again." The sheriff's jaw clenched. "Name?" "Elias Kerr," she said, the syllables tasting of rust and fear. Daltrey exhaled through his nose. "I know that one. Gambler. Mean streak a mile wide." He stood, the floorboards groaning under his boots. "Hard man to pin down. Folks too scared to talk." Cade's voice stayed even. "You gonna wait until he kills her?" The sheriff met Cade's gaze. "I'll do my job, but the law moves slower than a six-gun. She willing to testify?" Clara swallowed. The thought of facing Elias in court set her heart hammering, but she remembered the desert sun, the rope biting flesh, the endless silence. She straightened. "Yes, I'll stand." Daltrey nodded once. "Then we start a warrant. Deputies'll keep watch, but you both stay sharp. He won't scare easy." Outside, the bell at the church tower rang the noon hour. Clara stepped into the sunlight, feeling its weight like a challenge. Cade adjusted his hat and glanced at her. "You did right," he said. She looked back toward the open plains. Somewhere out there, Elias Kerr rode the wind, but for the first time she felt the steel of justice at her side, a fragile hope glinting like sunlight on a badge. Night fell heavy and restless across Cade's ranch, the moon a thin silver blade above the dark plains. The wind carried a scent of dry mesquite and something sharper, smoke. Clara stirred from a shallow sleep, heart quickening before her eyes even opened. A sudden crack echoed through the night, not thunder. A rifle report. Cade was already at the window, lantern held low. "They're here," he said, voice hard as iron. Clara joined him, peering into the black. Figures emerged from the tree line, 5 riders, torches flaring like hungry stars. The lead silhouette rode tall and crooked, Elias. The gang whooped and hollered, their laughter mean and jagged. Hooves churned the dirt, torches spitting embers into the wind. Cade grabbed his rifle, loading rounds with practiced hands. "Stay behind the hearth," he ordered. "Don't open that door for anyone but me." The first rock shattered a window. Glass rained across the floorboards. Clara flinched, clutching the shawl around her shoulders. "Clara!" Elias's voice bellowed through the dark. "Come out, girl. Let's finish what we started." Cade stepped onto the porch, rifle leveled, lantern casting a sharp glow across his weathered face. "You're trespassing, cur. Turn back or you'll leave feet first." Elias laughed, a sound cold enough to still the crickets. "You think that pop gun scares me? Hand her over and I'll let you live." A second gunshot cracked the night, Cade's warning shot. The bullet sparked off a rock near Elias's boot. The outlaw's grin twisted. "Fire the place if you have to," he snarled to his men. Torches arced through the air, striking the side of the cabin. Flames licked at the wood, smoke curling like black snakes. Cade ducked back inside, dousing the fire with a wet blanket. "Bar the door," he barked. Clara pushed a heavy beam across the frame, breath ragged. Outside, the gang circled, shadows against the firelight, their shouts a cruel chorus. Gunfire punched holes through the shutters. Sparks rained from the eaves. Clara pressed close to Cade, feeling the tremor of the walls as the night itself seemed to close in. He steadied her with a hand on her shoulder, eyes fixed on the dark beyond the windows. "They won't break us," he said, calm amid the chaos. "Not tonight." The cabin stood like a lone fortress against the storm, lantern glow fighting the wild dark as the outlaw's gang tightened its deadly ring.